nonprofit community. So we're here today really as an opportunity to convene. We're actually here to make sure that folks have an opportunity to learn about our process, but more importantly, have an opportunity to have your questions answered. So as we go through this session today, as you see the agenda, it's going to be comprehensive in scope and scale to make sure that we're touching on those salient points. And so we really want to make sure that this is an engaged effort and that all of you feel included in this process and are able to participate. I also want to just start by just saying that this grant opportunity is one that is generated out of the wonderful contributions of individuals like yourselves, as well as our corporate partners, as well as our civic individuals throughout our community. The campaigns that are typically run throughout our community are the reasons why we have these dollars that are investable back in the community. And I know you as organizations that typically hold campaigns or folks who don't hold campaigns, but are just fortunate and willing to participate in funding some of the work at United Way. Your dollars are making these efforts happen. So I wanted to just take a pause and say thank you for your support and appreciate the rest of our community making this all happen. As I wanted to say, as we get grounded, this is going to be a discussion around our Impact 100 grant award process for this year. And what I really want to make sure that we understand is that when we think about 100 organizations or 100 grant awards being delivered throughout our community, we're talking about a distribution to a small group of organizations, but that's not to suggest that if you're not awarded dollars, that is an infraction or any kind of indictment against your organization. When you think about the landscape in the nonprofit sector with over 11,000 nonprofits here in Kansas City, we're just not able to support all of them. And this is an opportunity that we want you to make sure that this process is competitive, but there are also additional things at play just by virtue of just size and scope and the landscape. And we really want to make sure that we're underscoring that the vital work that's being done in our nonprofit sector is incredibly important. So we want to make sure that this process is as equitable and distributable as we possibly can, because we're also making investments, if you will, across a 6-county region. So as we start with the agenda slide again, we're going to be taking an opportunity to make sure that we're going to be very comprehensive in our discussion. And we want to encourage everyone to ask questions because this session is for you, and we're going to move forward. I thought I would start next by just giving you a feel for the team. This is the United Way Community Impact Team. We are a small team, but we're having an opportunity to do so much work in our community. And so this is a pictorial graphic representation of the team. But chief among those who are going to be really involved in some of our Impact 100 efforts are the folks that you have grown to know and to love. And that is primarily Karen Gettinger, Jim McDonald, and Amy Haas, as well as myself. We're also going to be leveraging our entire team to be involved in this effort, but the folks that you're going to be having more engagement with on a more one-on-one basis are the individuals I just mentioned. And they're going to be also the ones participating and having discussions around our conversation here this morning. As we move along, I wanted to just spend some time talking about our grant making approach and how we're really approaching making these opportunities available to our community. First of all, when we talk about utilizing the principles of trust-based philanthropy, what this means is that United Way will be providing a 1-year grant that's unrestricted to your organization in support of your mission. And what's important about that is that these funds are really in support of your organization in totality. And we're not necessarily funding a program. We strongly believe that your organization is in the best position to know how to use these funds for your organization. So these funds are not prescriptive, and that is by design. As such, we've taken this opportunity to use this session and to use this iteration now that we're going into our 3rd year to take advantage of the feedback that we've heard from all of you and really decided to approach this in a very streamlined manner, and that's our hope. And you'll be able to want to tell us if we've achieved that goal. The process of the application process is one of designed to be of low barrier, and we're also trying to make it as seamless as possible. We've only gone down to 12 questions, which comprise of the process. We're asking everyone to just have 3 pages of the application narrative. You're not going to be required to have a budget form. We're asking for minimal post application or award reporting. We're also making sure that we are going to be supporting a broad base of agencies aligned within the health and human services arena. And what you'll get exposure to is our community need index. Some of you were able to participate in our Ignite session. Some of you have heard about the community needs index in other ways, but the community needs index is something that we're going to make available for you as a reference point as you think about the breadth and depth of those opportunities within the health and human services arena. Is that this year you'll see an intentionality. The intentionality is really around making sure that we are including within our network a real focus on transparency and accountability across the organizations. And we'll get into that in a lot more detail. But one thing I just want to highlight here is that as a recipient of these awards and these grants, there's going to be a real focus on making sure that you get exposure to our corporate partners, individual donors within our space. You'll be have the opportunity to participate in engagement opportunities, because what happens during this process is that as you get exposure to our corporate partners and to donors, you'll also get an opportunity to have those organizations potentially write in your organization that will allow you to receive funds directly to your organization. Those funds that are captured during this time will come to your organization without any administrative fees. And if you think about the history of United Way, that's a point of real celebration and an area that a lot of folks have been excited about. Any questions at this point? Okay, I thought I'd just take us through some insights about what's different as we've approached into this third cycle of our efforts. What's different this year, and one that I'm personally excited about, is that I get to join all of you in this process. I have an opportunity to learn more about your organizations for those I know about, but I also have an opportunity to get to know a plethora of new organizations that are in our community that I just haven't had exposure to. So that's what really drives me and makes me excited about this effort. As I mentioned before, our team has been really judicious and conscientious and really trying to refine and streamline this process for this year. And as I mentioned, we're going into our third grant cycle for these opportunities. And we've really taken your feedback to heart and really been deliberate about it. And so I want to just hit upon those few things as we talk about approaching this RFP process and what we're asking of all of you. Because of the trust-based philanthropy orientation of this grant, we're really going to be asking for you all to aggregate your participant data at the organizational level. Because, as I mentioned before, we're funding the organization, we're not necessarily funding programs, so we're asking you to aggregate those numbers and give us that view at the organizational level. It was also important for us to streamline some of the service categories. We had 21 last year, and we decided to bring those down to 12 by just simply looking at those categories in broader terms without losing any of the focal areas. We've also decided to shorten the narrative section from 4 pages down to 3. We also thought it was really important to heighten our focus on equity, inclusion, and access to services, because really we're trying to build an inclusive community where more of our partners and more of our community members will have access to our services. We've also been deliberate in expanding the number of applicant reviewers. We thought that was important. So we've actually engaging in over 100 community volunteers that are folks who have been actively engaged with United Way over the years as community partners, such as serving as on our different committees. people within our corporate partner arrangements that have expressed an interest to be much more engaged and really working with United Way as a thoughtful volunteer. And all that is going to happen with them operating with the highest level of integrity as they engage in this effort with no disclosure information, operating with the highest, again, at the highest levels of integrity. But we're super excited about that. We've also are asking you to focus on those most significant programs of your organization. We're asking you to define that for us. You know, as you think about your organization, those key factors that really resonate as the core pieces of your organization. So we're asking you to really spend some time and bring that clarity to us. So we're asking you to do that with no more than 5 programs. And we're also asking you to reduce the service categories to only 2 per program. As we move on, I also want to just make sure that it's important as you all are investing your time and your energy, because we know that you're a very highly overworked in some respects professionals. And to take advantage of these opportunities, you really want to know how to set your sights. And so we thought it would make sense if we spent a few moments just making sure that you knew where were our core investment areas. And our core investment areas really represent a wide range within the health and human services category. And if you were so inclined to just want to capture and track along with me in this, some of you may have already gone to our website and pulled down the PDF versions of this application. And if you have already done that, where I'm referring to right now is on page 2 under the community investment areas. And really, this is designed to give you a sense of different areas that are county region. And really, what I want you to also have an opportunity to do is to complement not only with these 12 different category areas, but we also are pointing you to our community and needs index, which will offer you even additional insights into how we broaden each within those categories more opportunities. So I encourage you all to take an opportunity to not only review this, but also take advantage of looking at the Community Needs Index for further opportunities to understand how your organization might, in fact, fit in. So, complementary to that, it's also important for you to have a sense of which organizations are outside of our core health and human services areas. And therefore, they're not going to be funded as part of our Impact 100 grants. What I want to make sure that I underscore here is that this does not diminish the incredible work that's being done across our community. It really is just a focal point of that some of these areas really fall outside of our investment. So if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, please. That's what I'm talking about here. These are the type of organizations that really fall outside of our core health and human services arena. So I just want to give you a moment to check those out. Again, if you're following along with your application, those are on page 3. Let me just stop there for any questions. Okay. Barring none, I'll move along. As we move forward, I think it's important for you to have a sense of really what United Way is going to be doing as we're moving towards our selection criteria. So if you wouldn't mind advancing that slide, thank you so much. We're going to use 2 sets of criteria with which we're going to be making our selection process. And the first one looks at the merits of your individual organization, and that's what we have listed here. And the other will take into consideration the composition of the overall grantees across our 6-county region. And so as you all are thinking about putting your best foot forward with respect to your application, these are the areas that you're going to want to spend some time focusing in on and being thoughtful about. That's a demonstration of your track record of service in the community to make sure your mission is in fact aligned with United Way's investment pillars. You want to demonstrate how your organization is addressing community needs and the unique factors that affect your organization's target population. You're going to want to outline how your organization is designed to support participant outcomes. You're going to want to highlight your organization's track record of holding high standards of organizational accountability and transparency. You're going to want to explain how your organization's commitment to equity and inclusion. And you want to make sure that you clearly define credible and effective ways in which your organization is impacting our human services ecosystem. So those are the areas that I really want to just make sure that you spend some time on and stay focused on, because that's where you'll have the best opportunity for impact as it pertains to your organization. The other thing that I want to just bring visibility to are those issues that are going to be coming to play from an ecosystem level. And again, this is really around areas that United Way will be focusing on that are going to be above and beyond the things that you're going to be able to take advantage of. You're not really going to have an opportunity to impact this portion of our decision criteria, because this is with us looking at how we're making decisions across the 6-county region and understanding that our support is broad-based and as inclusive as possible. But just to give you a sense of what that looks like, these are the areas that we're talking about here. We're going to be investing in a wide range of strategies and approaches designed to improve our community. We're talking about those that emerge from, immediate critical needs to those that might be preventative in terms of strategies. We're going to make sure that our investments are in a wide range of health and human services domains across health, education, and financial stability. We were going to make investments within our 6-county metropolitan area, which is defined as Cass, Clay, Jackson, and Platte counties in Missouri, and Johnson and Wyandotte in Kansas. And really, we're going to make investments that are going to be more far-reaching into the lives of as many people as possible. But we're also going to be intentional in recognizing that even smaller organizations that may be working with a fewer number of individuals, they still could be making a deep and lasting impact into our community, and so they would be considered as well. And so what I want to do now is just move to where we started. I want to just make sure that we're talking about the fact that, we're going to be making 100 grants to our community. And unfortunately, not every organization that aligns with our interest areas and that might meet our selection criteria would be funded or awarded. And again, if I can do so much as to stress this, please do not assume that this is an indictment on your organization or that your application was not comprehensive and that you're not doing incredible work. At the end of the day, we have a finite number of dollars of resources to make it available to our community, and we want to make sure that we're being the best stewards of those resources. Additionally, I want to just make sure that you're aware that as we go through this process, and if you advance to the next slide, please, organizations that are still not selected for Impact 100, you're still eligible to receive dollars that are donated by our community partners and our corporate partners that have identified your organizations to be eligible for contribution. So what I mean by that is, as we go out to campaigns, and you may have a board member that may work with a corporate organization that has decided that they really want to honor your organization as part of the United Way campaign. Those dollars will come directly to your organization without any penalties, with no fees, and directly attributed to your organization. So even from that perspective, you are in fact part of a broader United Way partner in our community, and you're part of United Way's network. So I just want to make sure that you understand that and recognize that we all are part of this ecosystem, and you're an important part of that ecosystem. So with that, I wanted to just say thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to address you. And I'm going to now turn it over to Jim McDonald, who's going to go into a lot more details on the items that we've touched upon right now, but with a lot more granularity as it pertains to the application process. Thank you.
Thanks, Precious. Amy, if you could click to the next slide. So I'll share with you now a little bit about the proposal forms that you'll have to complete and the required information as a part of the application process. And again, happy to answer any questions as they come up. You can just put your question in the chat. You can also feel free to unmute. And then Karen, if you can keep an eye on the chat, and then just signal me if there are any questions that I need to address. So the Impact 100 proposal consists of several sections. If you're a current Impact 100 grantee, there are 3 sections. If you're a new applicant or if you're not currently receiving funding from United Way through the Impact 100 grant program, then there's 4 sections. And that's because one of the sections are certification, which I'll talk about in a moment. Current grantees have already submitted that component of the funding and reporting requirements earlier this year. So there is the proposal narrative, as Precious has touched on. We are also asking this year for a list of your organization's programs. I'll talk more about that list in a moment. And then finally, a participant demographic form. There's some key changes there that we've touched on, but I'll go into more detail about that in a minute. And then finally, for organizations not currently funded, there is the United Way certification questionnaire, which is that 4th component for organizations not currently funded. Soon, each of your organizations will get an email from United Way that includes a link to the application forms that are unique to your agency. You all will have kind of an account in United Way's online funding application database. The email that you receive will have a link that takes you directly into the application forms. You won't have to use a username and password to get into them. You can share that link with other individuals in your organization who you'll be collaborating with on your proposal, but be sure not to share the link outside of your organization because it's a link that's to your organization's unique account profile. And so it wouldn't do them any good to have it. If you have a colleague that needs the application link provided to them, send them our way and we'll get it to them. So keep an eye out for that email from United Way that has your online funding application link. The current Impact 100 organizations, you should get that link by the end of this week. We're going to try and get most of them out tomorrow. So keep an eye out for it. It will be an email that is automatically generated by our funding application database. So sometimes those emails get blocked by spam filters or they end up in your junk folder. So we're also going to send a Microsoft Outlook email that just gives you a heads up that the link has been sent, and it'll make you aware if if it's maybe not landed in your inbox as it should, and you can reach out to us to troubleshoot as needed. For new applicants or those who are not currently funded in the Impact 100, your link will come later. We will get that out to you by November 29th. So keep an eye on it then. And in the meantime, you all have, available to you today, everything you need to begin preparing your proposal. That link is just the final step where you can then transfer your proposal into the online forms. But we encourage you to use the Microsoft Word template of the application forms that has been posted alongside the RFP document on United Way's webpage. One other point I'll make about the online forms relates to the proposal narrative length. As Precious touched on, there is a 3-page limit to that form this year. And the measuring stick for that 3 pages is what the report looks like when we print it out of our system in a PDF format. And you have that same ability as you're preparing your proposal narrative to print it out, to save it as a PDF file. And so it's that PDF version of your narrative that you really should be keeping an eye on, not your draft Word document or not how it looks on the screen, but rather that PDF version of the application. There's a PDF icon that will appear on the application website. And that's the way that you can, see what it will look like and measure the length. We're not putting word limits per question with just, I think, one exception. So you have flexibility in terms of how you use those 3 pages. But again, keep an eye on the length of your proposal by using the PDF icon to either print it or to save it as a PDF and monitor the length in that way.
Jim, I have a question.
Yes.
Just regarding what you went over last year, if I remember correctly, I don't know, has your PDF been formatted any differently? Because I remember getting to like a 6-page Word document limit, and the PDF really shrunk it down to a shorter length. So I just kind of wanted to navigate that.
I appreciate your making that point. You're kind of like using real world experience to make the point that I was just making. The PDF version of the proposal is generous from the standpoint of type size and margins and that kind of thing. The other point, and Karen will touch on this as well in a moment, the questions on the application in that PDF version of the proposal, all of those questions, questions 1 through 12, which really are multi-part questions for the most part. The verbiage of the questions itself doesn't appear in the PDF version in the way that it does in the Microsoft Word template that we've provided. The questions themselves take up about a page and a quarter. So we were intentional by formatting the PDF version in that way. So instead, what you'll have is a section header. Questions 1 through 12. Actually, questions 11 and 12 don't appear on the PDF. I'll touch on that more in a second. But questions 1 through 10, and it'll have a header, that indicates the section, that indicates each section, whether it be, your organization budget, mission, organization description, programs and services, outcomes, and not those detailed questions. So that gives you, a little bit of extra length. And of course, depending on what, font size you're using when you prepare your draft, it could end up looking different. So very much encourage you as you're drafting your proposal to test out what it looks like in the online form. Click the PDF icon, and it'll enable you to monitor your length in that way. Don't go by the length in the Word document as you're preparing your draft. So I recognize that creates, it's a little bit tricky because, it's not like you want to kind of test out the length as you go by entering your draft verbiage into the form. You can save it without submitting it. And then again, run the report of your proposal using the PDF icon so you can see what the length actually is as you go. So thanks for raising that question. I think it's an important point. Okay, so the proposal narrative, 12 questions. 2 of them relate to program data. I'll touch on that in a moment. But the rest of them are narrative questions that you can, utilize your, precious 3 pages, at your discretion. There aren't word limits per question, as I've already noted, with one exception. And the narrative is really your chance to tell the story of your organization, the kinds of services it provides, who you're serving in the community, the role within the health and human service ecosystem the organization plays, what kind of community challenges you're hoping to address with the programs you offer, what makes your organization unique or particularly impactful in the community. As I've noted already, there are a couple of sections at the end of the narrative as it appears in the RFP where we ask for your program list and some program demographic data. That does not count to the 3 pages. I'll touch on 3-page limit. I'll touch on that more here in a second. The last note here, we are asking for you to list your programs that you have. We are limiting you to up to 5 programs. So just bear that in mind. Last year, we did not have a limit on the number of programs that you could list in your proposal. So keep that in mind, and it's perfectly fine for you to define your programs as you choose. So if you have, for example, 2 programs that are very closely related to one another, and you wanted to combine them for the purpose of this program list in your proposal, it's fine to do so. Amy, can you go to the next slide?
Jim, we have a question.
Oh, okay,
If
go
I
ahead, Karen.
can interrupt you.
Yeah, please do.
It's about the demographic data. If maybe you can talk about that a little bit, or well, I guess you're actually getting to that at the end of this section, right? So we can wait.
Yes, I will. Yeah, so we'll come back to that, the question on demographic data here in just a second. Okay, the first few questions in the narrative are just collecting some basic overview information of your organization. Organizational name. We want a sense of the organization's size from a budget perspective, and for that, we're asking you to tell us the annual operating expenses from your most recently completed fiscal year. And for this, we don't want you to include anything that might have sort of skewed the budget picture for that particular year. For example, if you're in the midst of a capital campaign, we wouldn't consider that capital campaign revenue as part of your as going toward your operating expenses. So you would want to factor that out. If you, for example, had a significant donation of food product that you then distributed out to the community, we're not going to want you to include the value of those food donations in your operating expenses. And we just need that one number. We're not, as Precious alluded to, our proposal does not require you to submit a budget form. We do ask you to submit, for new organizations, submit your financials in whatever format they exist. But you don't have to do a special United Way budget form as a part of your application. We ask you to share your organization's mission. This is the one section that we have activated the word limit in the online application form. And that was with some intentionality. You could probably go on, for a page or more talking about your organization's mission, but really there's places to do that in the other questions in the proposal narrative. Here, we just really want your mission statement, or maybe a slight elaboration beyond your mission statement. So for the purpose of keeping this section brief, we have placed a word limit of 200 words in the response to question number 3. Now, brief organization description. Here we're asking for something in the neighborhood of a 25-word brief description of your organization, so that we have that kind of brief descriptor available for the various purposes that we may need it, for marketing and communication purposes primarily, so that we can concisely describe your organization if you make it onto the Impact 100. So try and keep question number 4 to about 25 words. We did not activate the word limit in the form there because 25 words might be a little bit tricky, so you can feel free to go a little bit beyond that. But the point is that number 4 really should just be a very brief descriptor that doesn't take up a lot of column inches if we're using it in some kind of marketing document on our end. Next slide, Amy. Okay, question 5, we're inquiring about the geographic focus area of your organization. United Way is a metro-wide organization. We have a 6-county service area that we're providing community investments within, and within which we also raise dollars. So we want to say we're committed to investing in organizations that serve the entire metro area, and so we want to know what the geographic focus area of your organization is for the vetting process. And we ask you to provide some detail here. So if you're a metro serving organization where you serve all the counties, rather than just reporting that fact, provide a little detail about how you pull that off. For example, through physical office spaces throughout the community, through partnerships with specific school districts, or maybe, if you're offering home-based services, talk about that fact and reference which portions of the metro area that you maybe have a critical mass of services that you're providing to residents in their homes. For organizations that have a narrower geographic focus where you're not serving the entire metro area, please be descriptive there as well. For example, if you serve specific neighborhoods, please name the neighborhoods. If you're serving a specific set of zip codes, we wouldn't necessarily need you to list, if you have a long list of zip codes, wouldn't need you to list all of the zip codes. But if zip codes are the way that you define a service boundary, you can kind of describe that and maybe reference, which portion of the metropolitan area the zip codes where you're focused are within. Again, if you're serving a specific school district, I can think of a couple of organizations who have school district, a given school district's boundaries as their service areas. So that would be a way that they could describe where they're focused from a geographic standpoint. I should point out that later in the proposal, we do ask you to report the number of people that you're serving in each of the counties. So you don't have to get into that kind of quantitative detail, at least at the county level here in this question, because it would come later.
Jim,
Yes, go ahead, Karen.
we had a question, and I apologize, it was from a couple minutes ago, about the in-kind donations. Could you repeat that again? They just didn't quite catch it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was just making the point that if if your budget number for your last fiscal year happens to include things that don't relate to specifically to operating expenses, such as a significant in-kind donation of, and I used food as the example, but you could just as easily be the recipient of $500,000 in office furniture. So any kind of valuation of in-kind resources that might be showing up in your budget, but that aren't really contributing to how you cover your operating expenses. We just don't want anything that might skew the picture of your budget. We're just really interested in what is that overall picture as it relates to the operating expenses of your organization.
There was also a question relative to the investment categories. I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that yet again. If
Right.
you wanted to look at the application itself, it's going to be on page 2 of the application where it lists the investment areas, as well as there's an opportunity to understand even more deeply around what those investment areas are if you were to refer to the Community Needs Index. So those are the 2 places where you can garner that information. I also put in the chat copying and pasting from the documentation. So the format's a little bit wonky there, but I do have them listed for you.
Yeah, thanks, Precious. And the reference to copying and pasting reminds me of another point I'll just make here. Karen may touch on it as well. After you've prepared your draft and you begin entering it into the online application portal, you probably don't want to write, do original writing in the online application portal, right? You want to prepare your draft in a Word document, but then you can transfer your draft into the online form, test out the word length. You can save it without submitting it, and do a complete review before you submit it. And I would just recommend that you not copy and paste out of the Word document into the online form, because formatting can get a little bit messed up there. For example, quotation marks get turned into question marks if you copy and paste. So instead, I would recommend rekeying all of the information into the form fresh, rather than copying and pasting from the Word document. And on the issue of the service categories, they are listed, as Precious noted, in the RFP. And in a moment, I'll touch on where that shows up in your application or in your proposal form. So
Jim,
yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, there is one more question, and I'm going to read it. For organizations that include a parent organization and multiple affiliate organizations with their own separate EINs, when addressing up to 5 program overviews, can I identify each of these affiliates as programs and then detail what they provide to the community as services rather than programs?
I don't see why not. Yes, yeah, for really large organizations where you may have a parent organization with, 3 or 4 subsidiary organizations that together serve the metro area, I wouldn't see any reason why you couldn't treat those subsidiary organizations as programs for the purposes of this proposal. So yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. So number 6, where we ask you in the narrative to describe programs and services. Really, this should probably constitute the longest answer to the questions in the proposals. This is kind of the meat of the proposal, where you're talking about what it is your organization does to serve people in the community. And also, since we don't really have a dedicated question on the issue of target population, we're wanting you to comment on who you're serving, that target population here within the program and programs and services section. And then similarly, since we don't have a dedicated section on community need, where we're asking you to comment on the community need the organization is addressing, we've incorporated that here into the program services section. So you can sort of tell us what are the services you're providing, who are you providing them for, and what are the community challenges that you're trying to address with those services. Number 7, we're on the question that relates to the role of your organization in the broader human service ecosystem. Here, we're trying to get a sense of the context within which your organization is operating. So we would expect to see things along the lines of how your organization collaborates with other nonprofits, with government and other public institutions within the community. You could talk about how you receive referrals from those organizations, how you make referrals to other organizations, what niche within the kind of subsector within the health and human service sector that your organization is operating. How do those relationships enhance the work of your organization? To the extent that we do want some discussion here of the ways that you collaborate within the community, would recommend against just providing a laundry list of institutions that you collaborate with. Rather, I think it would make more sense to kind of characterize the nature of that collaboration. Question 8 relates to the concept of equity in program design and service delivery. So regardless of the type of services your organization provides or the geographic area that it serves, the issue of equity as it relates to diverse communities really affects all organizations. So with that in mind, we want to know, what steps your organization is taking to address the inequities that exist in our community. Perhaps you've made changes to your hiring and training practices. Maybe you've implemented specific organizational or programmatic policies to better serve communities of color or address systemic barriers that they face in the community. Whatever considerations and steps you've taken to consider the important issue of racial and ethnicity, racial and ethnic equity in the work of your organization, we would ask that you describe it here in this section. Next slide. So in many ways, building on the question around equity in question 8, question 9 talks about the accessibility to services within your organization. And really the broader set of factors that contribute to the diversity of the population you serve. Here you're asked to address ways that your organization ensures access to the services that you provide by members of the target population that you serve, steps that you've taken to reduce barriers to access faced by program participants due to a wide range of considerations, including factors such as income, disability, transportation, language and culture, and other factors that could hinder access to services. We recognize that in the community, barriers that parts of the population face, really are immense. In many cases, we don't expect that all organizations who apply have figured this out and are perfect in all respects. But we understand that your organizations are taking important steps to ensure that the services that you provide are accessible to all segments of your target population. And we'd like to learn about those steps that you've taken. Question number 10 is on outcomes and impact. Here we're asking you to talk about the results of the work of your organization. You can provide qualitative or quantitative information about the organization's impact in the lives of the people that you serve. If you've been a longtime funded organization of United Way, you'll notice that United Way is no longer publishing standardized outcomes that we ask you to report on. And so this question is in lieu of that approach, where you have the opportunity, in a way of your choosing, to talk about the impact in the lives of participants in your programs and to tell that story of impact, again, using sort of qualitative and quantitative information.
Hey, Jim, I'm going to
And
interrupt you, please, for just
oh
one
yeah, go ahead.
second, if you don't mind. Someone would like for you to go back to the question regarding the ecosystem and provide a little
Sure.
more review and clarification around that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So in question 6, you're going to talk about the programs and services that your organization provides. So it's kind of a really sort of a question where you're going to provide information that is very much focused on your organization and the work that it does. And then in question 7, we want you to kind of step back and provide a broader perspective of how the organization is operating in the larger community. And so, for example, and I'll just take one particular uh, one particular service domain. So in the area of youth development, our organization or our community obviously has dozens, if not scores, of organizations whose mission is focused on youth development, whether it be after-school providers, mentoring organizations, leadership development programs that help youth make the successful transition from school to career. Um, and we're interested in knowing the ways that your organization, or to take the example of youth development organization, the ways that that youth development organization operates within the broader community. So perhaps, for example, that organization is exclusively serving a particular school district, and it has dedicated a lot of resources to serving that particular part of the broader community. And it has developed a strong working relationship with the leadership of that school district, and creates on-ramps from that school district to the programming of that organization. Um, Perhaps it has formalized referral relationships, not just with that school district, but with other institutions within the community. Another lens through which you can look at this ecosystem question is, those things that sort of those things that sort of qualify your organization to do the work that it does. So perhaps, for example, there's a state entity that provides funding to do the kind of work that your organization does. And maybe your organization is one of a half dozen organizations that have contracts with that state entity in this community to do that work. So you could talk about that fact, the fact that your organization is one of a half dozen organizations who have contracts with a particular state agency to provide a particular service.
Jim,
yeah, go ahead, Karen.
we have another question. Says, for outcomes, then are we looking at short-term within the grant year, or are you looking for long-term outcomes of programs?
Yeah, short-term versus long-term outcomes. I'd be curious to know some about both. And that short-term versus long-term questions, there are outcomes that organizations and their services are responsible for that are short-term and that can be measured, that are more, the measurement of which are more within the control of your organization, and you have data to back it up. Would certainly want to know about those outcomes. But perhaps there are other outcomes that are longer term in nature, that maybe relate to the life trajectory of the participants that you're serving. We're all well aware of the long-term impacts of strong mentoring programs for youth, and a mentoring program that is serving middle school age students might have a lot to do with whether that middle-aged student makes it to college. But unless your mentoring program is intensive and long-term, and you're serving that student, until such time as they go to college, you're probably not going to have data that speaks to whether or not that student made it to college, and and that's fine. We understand that. But if you know that your organization and its services and the work that you do has longer term impacts that show up in the life of the person long after you stop serving them, but you don't have data related to those impacts, that's still part of your organization's story, and I would expect that you would touch on those things in this section.
Jim, we also had
There's
a
a question. Yeah, I think I was just
Okay.
looking at the same one probably as you, and let me know if I'm not. But it was a question about whether a diagram that helps explain an organization's role within an ecosystem would be appropriate. And my first reaction is, oh yeah, I think that would be interesting to see. But unfortunately, just by virtue of the nature of how we collect your proposals, we don't have the capacity for that. So, for example, if you were to try to copy and paste that diagram into the answer field in the online form, it wouldn't translate. So unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. You're going to have to use words to kind of paint that picture as opposed to a graphic.
And there is another question about service categories and just asking for more clarification about what is meant by service categories.
Yeah. Okay, Amy, if you wouldn't mind, because I think this is an important one, just toggle back to the slide where we listed them. Yeah, you'll want to keep going back. It was under the part of the presentation that Precious did. There's just one more back. Here we go. So yeah, we've called them here community investment areas, but really that's the same thing as service category. Essentially, within our community and needs index, this list of areas is kind of the lens through which we looked at community need in the community needs index. And we've kind of transferred that or that kind of organization of how we're looking at community needs to our grant process. And so when your organization, applies for funding, we're asking you, and I'll show you the form here in a moment, but we're asking you to name the programs that your organization provides. You get a little chance, and I'll touch on this in a second, to give a brief descriptor of each of those programs. Of course, in the narrative, you're also talking about those programs. But when you list the programs in your proposal, we're going to ask you to choose one of these 12 categories to align each program. So let's say you're reporting that you have 3 programs. I'll take a kind of a hypothetical example. So let's say you're an organization that addresses family violence, and maybe you provide outreach services, case management, wraparound supports, and temporary housing in the form of shelter or some kind of transitional living program. So you would name the services that you provide. Maybe you have a shelter program, and then you would want to align that program with the housing security category. You'll have the chance to name a second category to align a program with. So maybe that housing program for survivors of family violence would align with the housing security category, as well as the financial stability and employment category, if you're providing those kind of supports as well. So when we say service categories, this is the list of service categories that you'll find in the RFP. In a moment, I'll touch on where they'll show up in the online funding application. And with that in mind, Amy, why don't you go ahead and toggle forward, and I can address that here in just a moment. I'll let you know when to stop. Okay, okay, go back one slide. Great. So I've talked about accessibility to services, outcome, and impact. Question 11 is about people served. In the online version of the application, this question 11 doesn't show up because in the narrative, because it's its own form where we're wanting you to report the number of people you served organization-wide and also at the program level. And so I'll tell you more about what I mean by that if you want to toggle to the next slide, Amy. Okay, so there in the online version, there'll be this essentially this will be a separate form where we're asking you to list your organization's programs, up to 5 of them, but not more than 5. Provide a brief descriptor of the organization, and then to name which of the 12 categories the program aligns with. And if the program is multifaceted, you have a chance to name a secondary category that each program aligns with. That's optional. You don't have to choose a secondary category if it's pretty straightforward in a pretty straightforward way aligned with one of the categories on the list. You can just name the one. That's fine. And then for that program, we want to know the total number of people the program served last year. However you define your programmatic year, we don't care what 12-month period it was, but we're interested in a year's worth of data, just the head count of the number of people that the program served. Now, you might say, oh, well, we've got more than 5 programs. You're only letting me list 5 here. To that, I would say yes, but if you have a group of programs that are closely linked to one another, maybe they're serving, the same target population, but they're a part of a continuum of services, I think it would be fine for you to combine those and to come up with kind of an umbrella name for those programs. It's also fine if you choose not to do that. But our interest here is in allowing for nuance by letting you tell us the names of your individual programs, but also not making the application unwieldy. Last year, I think we had one organization that had listed more than a dozen programs. And so we're interested in just, making the information you provide a little bit more manageable on our end, hence the limit of 5 programs. Okay, and then Amy, if you can toggle to the next slide. Okay, so I just want to respond to a question on the slide. It says on people served, earlier I mentioned to address this in the program services. How do you want to see this as different than what is included in question 11 versus question 6? So question 11, people served, we're really just looking for the number of people served. Okay, not a description of them, not we do ask for the number of people served, and in a moment here I'll talk about how we want them the number of people served broken out by demographic category. When you're in the online version of the proposal narrative form, question 11 doesn't even show up because it's just quantitative data that we're looking for. We're looking for a head count. If you want to describe the target population, which you should, I think, you do that in question 6. Yeah, thanks for that comment, Precious. Yeah, question 11, it shows up in the form of a grid. And here I'm going to get into it here in a second. It doesn't even show up in the proposal narrative form online. Okay, so we're looking for participant demographic data. We're really looking just for a head count of the number of individuals served by the program. And then we want that number of people served broken out in several different ways. The first is by county of residence. And for Jackson County, because of kind of the uniqueness of the urban core of Jackson County and Kansas City versus the other parts of Jackson County, we've actually split it into 2. So we ask that you report Eastern Jackson County separately from the number of people served in the Kansas City, Missouri portion of Jackson County. We had a question yesterday about residential programs like a shelter or a temporary housing program. Should you report the county of residence of the person while they're in your program, in that housing program, where it's located, or where they came to you from, if you knew their prior address from? And I think our answer to that is use the address of the program that the housing program where they're housed currently in your program. So if you have a housing program that's just in one of these areas, let's say it's just in Johnson County, even though you serve people that come to you from Wyandotte or Jackson or Cass County, you would report them all as Johnson County. There is one line here for you to report other counties. So if you are serving people outside of the Kansas City metro, we do care about that. And there's a place for you to report all other residents of all other counties on that, the last line just before the total line in the form. Now, I'll make another important point here. We're interested in participant demographic data across all of your programs at your organization, but we want them all rolled up for all those programs into this one form. So you will only get the participant demographic form once in your application packet online. And that is an important change from last year, where we were asking for the participant data by program. And so you could copy the form as many times as you needed. So again, we had one agency last year that reported 12 different programs and demographic data on all 12 of those different programs. Instead, this year, we're asking you to roll up all of the participant data across all of your programs, so the organization-wide view as opposed to the program view. And so again, this form will only show up once. Thanks, Amy. So the other demographic categories that we're asking for data on: gender, race, ethnicity, income level, age group. We recognize that the collection of this kind of data can be challenging, and we're perfectly fine if you have, estimates of data, if you don't have precise data. We also understand that if you're rolling up data across programs, you might not have a way to make sure that the data is unduplicated. So that's fine. If the data has some duplication from the fact that you have multiple programs that are serving the same people, that's fine as well. This report can include duplicated data. So this detailed demographic data, we're asking you to report on a single form for all your programs, the data rolled up. Now, over on that program list form, where we ask you to name the program, provide a brief descriptor, align it with a category, over there we do ask for a total number of people served by each program, but not broken out in the demographic category. So I just want to call that out, because that is, in a sense, it is really asking for the data a different way by program, but that's just the total head count number, not split out by demographic area for each program. Yes, so there was a good question that came up. What if your organization doesn't directly serve clients, meaning your clients aren't individuals or individual households in the community, and you don't have, a head count to report to us? That's okay. Your organization is still able to apply for funding. I kind of think of you more as operating at a systems level. And maybe the clients of your organizations are actually other organizations, and that's perfectly fine. And we understand that you're not going to have individual participant data to report here. You might have it because maybe you're collecting data from other organizations. Like I know, for example, Harvesters does a great job of collecting. They don't serve families individually by and large. They maybe have one or two programs that do, but most of their food distribution is done through other organizations. But I know that Harvesters collects data from those other organizations, and they have means by which they're measuring the number of lives touched in the community. So maybe that organization could provide this data, even though they're operating at systems level. But if you don't have the data and you can't report it at the individual level, that is okay. You can leave this section blank. And there is going to be basically in this form, in the online application, a text box where you can, address this fact, talk about why you don't have individual demographic data, and you can describe in more of a narrative way, the population that you're reaching, even though you don't have that head count data. That's perfectly fine, and we fund several organizations that fit into this group currently. Now, one other point I'll mention that is on the program participant demographic data form in the online version this year, and then we didn't ask last year, is the race ethnicity of your organization's chief executive officer. So just keep an eye out for that. That is one of the data points we're asking for this year, and we didn't ask for it last year, so it is new. Just checking the question log. Okay. So Amy, why don't we move on to the next slide? Okay, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Karen Gettinger here at this point. She'll talk a little bit more about process and about some special notes for applicants that are not currently funded, the additional steps that you have to take and information that you have to provide. So Karen, with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. You probably know my name from dozens of emails that you've received from me. So hopefully that doesn't mean you have a bad taste in your mouth when you see me up here talking. But I'm here to hopefully just give you some additional information about new applicants, kind of what's required there, and just going to kind of remind you of some things we've already said, and then we'll close it out and open the floor for questions. There was a question from earlier that I would just want to go ahead and address, and that was about the survey form and kind of what's on the, sorry, not the survey, the intent to apply form. And I wanted to, first of all, make you all aware that that is available on the website. So please go there and you can look at it fully. And it's a combination of just some kind of basic organizational questions. So we want to make sure you're registered as a 501c3, that you are incorporated in your state, and that you've filed the things that you have to file as a nonprofit, your 990s, and that you're operating kind of at a level where you have financials available and you're reviewing those regularly. And then there's another section on the intent to apply where we list some types of organizations that we generally are not in the habit of funding. And so that's kind of in the middle of it. And then there's some additional questions around the types of organizations and specific things that may make you ineligible. It does not mean, if you answer no to one of these questions, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not eligible to apply. We will review all of the submitted intent to apply documents and respond to you directly to let you know whether or not you're successful in that. If anybody, if you have any specific questions about, once you fill this out and you want to know, I would say maybe just give us a little bit of time to review it. And we may be reaching out to you with questions. We may have additional questions if you answer something in a way that we're, we want more information. So you might expect that. Hopefully that answered the question for that individual. And it also just starts me off on my first slide. So the intent to apply form and the eligibility questionnaire is required for organizations who are not currently funded. So if you haven't filled it out yet and you are a new organization, please just do that. You have until November 15th to actually do that, but I would just recommend doing it just as soon as you can. We will get back to you to let you know whether or not you are eligible to apply by November 29th. We are going to try to respond to you sooner than that, but it may be as late as November 29th. And one of the ways that you'll know that you are eligible is because we will be sending you, and it'll come from me, a unique link in an email, and that link will connect you to the online documents that you will need to use to apply. So something else for new applicants that's specific to them is the certification questionnaire. That is really what we use to make sure that the organizations that we're funding are run in a way that they are, we can say they meet a certain level of accountability, and that we can kind of go back to our funders, our donors, and kind of attest to them that we are using your money wisely. Those donations that you're making to us are not only important, but are also you know, we are vetting our organizations to make sure absolutely that that you meet certain levels, and therefore we're you know, again, being good stewards of donors' generous gifts. Next slide. Here's a list of documents that you will need to provide us when you apply. So, you know, it kind of looks like a long list, but I think most of these you will have pretty easily available in your files. What I would recommend, I think we've referenced to a certain degree how our web portal is not the most user-friendly. And because of that, I would really recommend just pulling these all together in one place, you know, in a file folder, so that when you are working on your application in the portal, you have it easily available and can just attach those directly without much trouble. It's the easiest way to make sure that you don't forget anything, and also that you know, you don't get timed out of our website or anything odd happens that might cause you some consternation. Next slide.
Karen,
Oh,
can I
yes.
interrupt with a couple of questions?
Yes.
So, so the first one is, some of our programs collect data for households served versus people. Should we note this somewhere, or just household number for that program and people number for the other programs? And maybe I can take this since I was talking about the data question. So it kind of depends. So like, let's say you have a financial stability, you know, coaching program, and the head of household is the client, but the other household members indirectly receive a benefit, but they're not really clients of the program. Then I would say just report that head of household, the individual. But let's say your program is distributing, you know, food baskets that benefit how all the members of a household. I would say that we want you to include those other members of the household. And rather than reporting households, we would ask you to convert that number to a people count. So really, generally speaking, we want individual lives touched. And so if you know that you served 100 households through your food pantry, and the average household size is 3 people, we would expect you to report 300 people. So we want a people count, not a household count. And whether you know, convert the household number, you know, to a people number, kind of depends on, you know, the nature of the program and whether there's a direct benefit to all the members of the household. There's another question that I added to the chat, but Laurel gave a thumbs up to, is if an organization is not a current Impact 100 grantee, but was in the prior funding cycle, does that organization have to submit an intent to apply submission? And I'll let you answer that one, Karen.
Yes. So anyone that is not currently funded does have to submit an intent to apply form. So yes, even if you were just, you know, funded a year ago, the answer is still yes, please.
And then the last question that I'll offer is, does United Way allow organizations that are not a 501c3 to apply under a fiscal agent that is a 501c3? And the short answer to this question is yes, but I would say that it's really applicable to those organizations that are on their way to becoming a 501c3, but they're not yet. And so they may be operating under the auspices of someone who is. So those kind of startup organizations, or maybe, you know, maybe they, you know, your application is pending, but you have the benefit of another organization who's letting you apply for grants, and they're serving as your fiscal agent. That's perfectly fine. We do have in our eligibility criteria an expectation that organizations be serving the community for you know, a year or more. So if you don't have that year of service to the community, meaning that you are actually providing services and we're not just in the idea stage for a year, You know, so under that year threshold, you wouldn't be able to apply. But as long as you have a year or more of service to the community, even if your 501c3 hasn't come through yet, but you're operating under the auspices of another 501c3, that is okay. You can apply. Now, all that said, you know, United Way doesn't fund public institutions, so you know we don't fund school districts. You know, we don't fund parks departments. You know, we don't fund colleges, you know, public colleges and universities, or any colleges and universities, but public institutions we don't provide funding to. You have to be a nonprofit organization to qualify for a grant, or operating under the auspices of a nonprofit organization, and you're on the path to becoming a 501c3. Thanks, Karen. I'll let you get back to it.
Okay. So here's the next steps. Again, as I said, please complete the intent to apply form. You have until 5 p.m. on November 15th to do so. All the applications, the actual applications are due on Thursday, December 14th. The online portal will log you out if you are still working on your application around midnight. It might not happen right at midnight. It might be 5 or 10 minutes after, but shortly after that, you will be locked out. So just know that you literally have all day on the 14th, but only until 5 p.m. for the intent to apply form. Once you fill out that intent to apply form, as I mentioned, you will receive a unique link that will allow you to get into your organization's application forms. Only one person can be in that online portal at a time. So, you know, you can't be, you know, working on it, tag teaming, but you can share the link with each other. So if there's a part you're going to complete, but someone else is going to answer another section or work on demographics, you can share that link within your organization. You don't want to share it with anyone outside the organization. Like if someone's like, oh, I want to apply, it's unique to your organization. So please don't share it with people outside, because it's not going to really do them any good. Once you do fill out that intent to apply form, again, you'll be notified by November 29th whether or not you're eligible to apply. By that time is when you will receive that unique link for new organizations. For current Impact 100 organizations, you will be receiving those tomorrow. So be looking for that in your inbox. It likely will be later in the day, just to let you know. And then the grants actually will be reviewed, and we will be sending a notification to everyone by the end of June. We are hoping to notify you all earlier. I can't 100% guarantee that, but we're working on doing that. There's some things that we need to work out on our end, but the very latest will be the last day of June. So and then just to clarify, the grant period would start then July 1st of 2024 and run through June 30th of 2025. Next slide. Oh, you already put the next slide, Amy. Thank you. The timeline here are two different timelines based on whether you're a current grantee or a new applicant. They're basically the same, with the exception of the intent to apply submission is on that new application table there. So you've heard me say a bunch of times, and I don't think I can say it too much, that November 29th is when the new applicants will receive their link on or before then. And then December 14th is the due date. Next slide. So we are starting something new this year, which I'm excited about, and I'm hoping you all will find it helpful. We're going to have office hours, and I will probably be the person most often available during that office hour time. And the hours are Wednesdays from 1 to 2 and then Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And it'll be the same link for each of those meetings, and that link's right here. The one thing you should know about this is I'll be there for the full hour, even if no one's there. So if you're, it's 5 minutes till 2, log on and ask your question because I'll be there. Now, the couple of days that I won't be available for the office hours is just the week of Thanksgiving. November 22nd, 23rd, we will not have those office hours. So, and to be clear, I am going to be on a Zoom link today at 1 o'clock to answer any additional questions. So if you leave this meeting, you're discussing it with someone else and they're not clear, or you just want to ask a couple more questions that you didn't think to ask, please join me today because I will be there all by myself unless you join me. Another point about that is I will be there taking calls on Wednesday, December 13th and Thursday, December 14th, which is the due date. So I will be on those office hours on those days as well. And usually those days, honestly, I'm taking a lot of emails, questions, and if people are maybe having some problems with the link or what have you. So there's a couple things I want to say here. One is, please, when you get that link to your organization's web pages so you can apply, please go ahead and click on that. Just kind of make yourself a little bit familiar, just so you're not doing it at the last minute. If there is a problem, it'd be great to figure it out beforehand if you're a person that does things last minute. And then finally on the 14th, oh, yes, Jim.
I did want to come back to a question in the chat, but why don't you finish your thought and then I'll do it.
Oh, I was just going to say that, on December 14th, I will be on that office hours call. I will be answering emails and phone calls that day, but I won't be here. I won't be around and available till midnight. So again, if you are a person that does things last minute, that's fine. But after a certain time, I'm going to go home and have dinner and, do my thing. So, after 5 or 6 o'clock, I probably won't be available. So just wanted to let you know that, just in case you thought I might be waiting for your email at 11 o'clock at night. And so, yeah, Jim, you had questions, or someone had questions?
Yeah. So if I could, I'd like to come back to the question about the intent to apply form. So we've, I think, made it clear that if an organization is not a current Impact 100, but was last year, you would still need to submit the intent to apply form. There was a similar question posed, and I'm not 100% sure that we covered it. If an organization receives donor designated funding, has been receiving it for a while, including this year is receiving donor designated funding, but is not an Impact 100 organization, do they need to submit the certification form? And the answer to that is yes. It will show up in your online application packet, and you would need to complete it.
Yeah, and just to be clear, those organizations that are receiving designations, which is awesome, and we're happy to have you as part of our community, but we're not, we don't have that opportunity to vet you any other way because we've not collected that. So that's what that allows us to do, is collect that information, which we then use to just ensure that our Impact 100 organizations are meeting, a certain level of operation. And now is the time for questions. So if you guys want to take yourself off mute and just ask your questions directly, that's great. Or you can keep putting them in the chat because those are being monitored. Did we answer your call?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Our operating budget is significantly higher than it was for our most recently completed year. Which would you prefer?
We want the most recent. So if it's higher, that's fine. And yeah, that's perfectly fine. And we know those things they do fluctuate, and sometimes there's a big fluctuation, as you know.
Okay, and you would like our actuals?
Yes.
Thank you.
So folks, we literally have 2 minutes towards our allotted time. I'm really, really appreciative of the fact that you all hung in there with us and were incredibly engaged throughout this entire process. So really want to thank you for that. We want to be respectful to your time and questions. So just know that if folks need to dump off, that's not a problem. We will still stick around for a few more minutes to answer any other questions that may be lingering, and we'll be happy to entertain those. All right. I see a few more in the chat, and if folks are around and want to just participate, we will answer those questions for you in that fashion. But if not, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this session today. We really appreciate all that you do in our community. You're a vital part of making Kansas City a thriving environment for all. And just really want to thank you for your efforts and what you're doing day in and day out. You guys are an incredible team. So again, for those that had some burning questions, if you just want to stay on for a moment or so, we'll get those answered for you. But if not, enjoy the rest of your day. All right. Thank you so much.
Precious, there was a new question in the chat I'd like to address if I could.
So, sure.
So the person asked or said in the chat that they submitted the intent to apply form a couple of weeks ago. And do they still need to do it? And I just want to clarify that the intent to apply form was not up a couple of weeks ago. I think it went up about a week ago. So if you did it longer ago than that, it wasn't the intent to apply form. We kind of have a sort of we always have on our website a place where you can sign up if you're interested in applying for funding. But that's a very brief form. The intent to apply form asks a bunch of questions that aren't a part of that sign up form. So I would say just make sure the form that you filled out was in fact the intent to apply form. It would have that at the top of it. And just want to avoid any confusion about the interest form that was up prior to that.
Also, can I just make a statement that the link for the office hours is on our United Way of Greater Kansas City webpage under the Impact 100 section, and that is where you will find lots of good information. So if you're not sure where to go, I would say go there first. But I think there are a couple of additional questions that have come up. What fiscal year ending do we want? We want the most recent fiscal year. So whatever that means for you.
Yeah, and Karen, can I just be a little bit more specific than that, if you don't mind? I mean, what we ask for in the application is the most recently completed. So if you're in the middle of a fiscal year, we don't want that one. We want the most recently completed one. So whatever your fiscal year end was, the total expenditures from that previously ended fiscal year.
Okay, we have one other question that's been out there for a moment. The question around the demographic data and participants about county. Would you please address that? So we're a little bit over. So if Pharrell is still available, we'd love to address your question.
Yeah, and actually, if you wouldn't mind taking yourself off mute and posing it, just because I'm having trouble finding the original question in the chat. Yeah. Always available for follow-up questions after we end today's call too, of course. And Karen's got her office hours at 1, so.
Oh, it's back in the chat, Jim, with a little more specificity. The camera and mic is not working.
Okay, let me take a look. Demographic data, participants by county.
And then the just posted a second ago. Also a question about budget, question number 2. If we identify our affiliate organizations as program and each has their own budgets and own 990s, do we combine all those budgets as one, or can we identify each of their budget amounts separately.
Okay, yeah, so we'd like you to combine them. There's only one place where we ask for a budget number, and so I would say roll up the total budgets of all those subsidiary organizations into a single number and report that number as opposed to reporting them separately.
And please let us know if we've answered your question thoroughly, please. Pharrell, we just want to make sure that we've captured your question appropriately. Okay, good deal. Thank you. You're awesome. Everyone's awesome. Really appreciate everyone being here today. Any more questions? You guys have been an amazing bunch, really, truly. And we look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Just hang out here for just a few more minutes later, just in case anyone has any more questions.
You guys, did we address the demographic data and participants? I was trying to capture the answer in the notes in case it came up. But if we did, I missed it.
The question is about breaking, if they don't break down their accounts for Eastern Jack versus just Jackson County,
Mhm. Okay.
how should they go about reporting their demographic data?
What was your
Yeah, I
answer?
would say to make a good faith estimate of how the number breaks down.
Fabulous, Essence. Thank you. Thank you, Pharrell. Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. Appreciate that. Oh, we appreciate it. Yeah, I've got to really give the team lots of kudos for their deliberateness and thoughtfulness about being much more streamlined and making this easy, and also just wanting to create this opportunity for folks to have this one-on-one time, group time. And so wanting to make this a really inclusive and accessible process. So kudos to the team. That small and mighty team. So just in closing, folks, we're moving. And if you see all these wonderful backgrounds here, while we're trying to look all fancy, it's actually really purposeful because our walls look terrible. Our spaces are not that great. And we've got boxes galore. So we're trying to do a little masking act here. So there we go. So we're going to be in a new space coming up in 2 weeks. We're going to be above the main library on the 4th floor. So super excited about that space. And I'm really super excited to welcome all of you into that community. It's going to be accessible and a place for all of us to get together.
Just to clarify, we'll be at the Plaza Library, not the downtown library, in case you didn't
Did I
know.
say?
'Cause you
did I
said
say
Maine,
Maine?
and I
Okay.
figured some people may not have known which one we were referencing. So
Sure.
we're hoping our our heating and cooling will be better there,
And everything else.
and fewer leaks, and yeah, everything else.
Well, folks, as much as we'd love to have you here, we're really actually concluding our remarks, so you don't need to stick around. But we're happy to be here for you in the event that you'd like. We'll be around for another 5 minutes or so. These comments are so thoughtful, and thank you. You guys are really wonderful. Appreciate it.
Farrell, it's nice to know that you're on this call. I know we have talked so much, so just always appreciate it when you and we've talked so much that I feel like we're friends, but I wouldn't recognize her on the street.
Yeah, change that. We got to come into the office so we can meet you.
Yeah.
Very welcome. Well, we'll close out literally officially at 11:40. Just making sure that there's nothing folks are just thinking about and need. Well, as you know, we'll have those office hours, so please feel free to leverage those. Just gonna have another minute and then we're gonna officially close out. Now, for all of you who are still hanging around, can you give us help us celebrate the nuptials of a teammate of ours, Andres Sherrod? Congratulations, Andres. Welcome back. So good to see you.
Married man.
Married man.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
awesome
so
to
much.
see you.
I appreciate that. Thank you guys. Good to see all of you guys. Seriously. Thanks.
Love it too. Can't wait. Okay, folks, we're gonna actually formally sign off. Thanks again. Appreciate
Thanks,
everyone's
everyone.
participation. Bye-bye.